Welcome back to Listen Easy English, my friend. I'm really glad you're here with me today as we embark on another journey together. Have you ever thought about what it would be like to be born into a powerful family, but to grow up with very little? To look around at the world and feel deep down that you are meant for something greater? Today, we're going to travel back in time, over 2,000 years ago, to the city of Rome. Rome was a city of grand buildings and dusty streets, a place filled with busy people and hidden power. This is the story of a man who changed the world. He was a soldier, a writer, a speaker, and a leader. His name is Julius Caesar. So, take a deep breath, find a quiet spot, and let's begin the story. It was the year 100 BC. The city of Rome was alive with noise and movement. People walked through narrow streets, senators debated in the forum, and soldiers marched through the gates. Rome was powerful. Rome was proud. On July 12th of that year, a boy was born. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar. He came from an old and respected family known as the Julii. They were noble and believed they had a connection to the goddess Venus. However, being noble did not mean they were rich. By the time Caesar was born, his family had little money. They lived in a crowded part of Rome called the Suburra. This area was full of ordinary people, not senators or kings. Growing up, Caesar found himself between two worlds. He had a proud name, but he walked through humble streets. His mother, Aurelia, was a strong and smart woman. She encouraged him to read books and taught him that the mind is the most powerful weapon a person can have. Tragedy struck when Caesar was just 16 years old. His father died, and suddenly he was the man of the family. Young and alone, he felt the weight of responsibility. But even at a young age, something burned inside him, a quiet fire and a deep desire for more. He looked at the senators and generals around him and asked himself a question that would follow him throughout his life. Why shouldn't it be me? When Caesar was around 17 years old, he was given a significant role as a priest of Jupiter, one of the highest religious positions in Rome. But politics in Rome was dangerous. A powerful general named Sulla took control of the city. Sulla was known for his ruthlessness. He made lists of his enemies, and those on the lists often did not survive. Caesar was connected to Sulla's enemies through his family. His uncle, Marius, was a great general who had fought against Sulla. Caesar had also married a young woman named Cornelia, whose father was also an enemy of Sulla. Sulla ordered Caesar to divorce Cornelia to prove his loyalty. Many men would have obeyed, but Caesar refused. He was just a teenager, with no army and no real power. Yet, he looked at Sulla, one of the most dangerous men in Rome, and said, "No." Sulla was taken aback. Some say he even laughed at Caesar's defiance. He let Caesar live, but took away his priesthood, his property, and his wife's dowry. Caesar had to go into hiding, moving from place to place, always looking over his shoulder. He became ill during this time, but managed to survive. When Sulla's power began to fade, Caesar returned to Rome, empty-handed, but full of courage. He had lost everything, except the most important thing of all, his bravery. In Rome, courage was the seed of all great stories. After the danger with Sulla passed, Caesar decided to leave Rome for a while. He wanted to study and grow as a leader. He traveled to the island of Rhodes to learn about public speaking and philosophy. In Rome, being a good speaker was like having a powerful weapon, and Caesar understood this well. However, his journey to Rhodes became one of the most famous adventures of his life. While sailing across the Mediterranean Sea, Pirates captured Caesar and his small group of servants. Pirates were a serious threat during this time. They held Caesar for ransom, demanding 20 talents of silver, a small fortune. But instead of panicking, Caesar laughed. He told the pirates that 20 talents was not enough. "I am Julius Caesar," he said. "You should ask for 50. The pirates found his confidence amusing. They liked him and let him move around the ship freely. They played games together, and Caesar even read them his poetry and speeches. When they didn't listen carefully, he called them uneducated, all while maintaining a smile. Then, calmly and almost jokingly, he told them that once he was free, he would come back, find them, and have them killed. The pirates laughed, thinking he was joking. He was not. After 38 days, the ransom was paid, and Caesar was released. He immediately went to the nearest Roman port, gathered ships and men, returned to the pirates, captured them, and had them crucified, just as he had promised. This story spread through Rome like wildfire. Who was this young man who joked with pirates and then kept his word? Rome began to remember the name Caesar. When Caesar returned to Rome, he had gained something: new stories, a reputation, and a plan. He understood that in Rome, if you wanted power, you had to climb the political ladder, step by step. Caesar was charming, intelligent, and an extraordinary speaker. He wasn't afraid to spend money, even money he didn't have. He borrowed heavily and paid for public games and festivals. The crowds loved him. They felt he was one of them. Caesar walked among the people, remembered their names, smiled, listened, and provided them with bread and entertainment. In return, they gave him their votes and loyalty. He steadily climbed through the ranks, first becoming a military commander in Spain, where he led soldiers into real battle for the first time. He excelled, surprising even experienced soldiers with his bravery. He fought near the front lines, pushed his men hard, but also cared for them by learning their names. A soldier who feels seen will follow his general anywhere. Caesar returned from Spain with gold, victories, and a new confidence. He was now around 40 years old, and the most important chapter of his life was about to unfold. Back in Rome, Caesar noticed a problem. Power was divided and chaotic. Two great men stood above all others: Pompey, a celebrated general, loved by the army and the people, and Crassus, the richest man in Rome. Pompey had conquered lands in the east and brought great wealth to Rome, while Crassus had money and connections everywhere. Caesar understood something these two men did not fully see. Alone, none of them had complete power, but together, they could control everything. So, Caesar did what he did best. He talked, connected, and made deals. Quietly, he brought Pompey and Crassus together and proposed that they support each other, share power, and work together. This arrangement was informal, but later, historians would call it the first triumvirate, 3 men with one purpose. To strengthen this alliance, Caesar also gave his daughter Julia in marriage to Pompey. This was a political move, yes, but Julia and Pompey genuinely liked each other. Family bonds could hold alliances in ways that words alone could not. With Crassus providing money and Pompey providing military prestige, Caesar received what he needed most: a new command, a new territory, and a new war. He was appointed governor of Gaul, the vast and wild lands to the north and west of Rome, in what is now France. Caesar packed his belongings, said goodbye to Rome, and rode north. He did not know it yet, but he was heading toward the greatest achievements of his life. Gaul was not a single place. It was made up of many tribes, languages, and chiefs. Some tribes were friendly to Rome, but many were not. When Caesar arrived, he found the situation complicated. Tribes were moving, wars were brewing, and Caesar seized the opportunity. He moved quickly, fought fiercely, and made alliances where he could. He crushed resistance where he had to. His soldiers marched in all weather, built bridges over wide rivers in just a few days, and constructed walls around entire cities, moving with a speed that shocked their enemies. Over the course of 8 years, Caesar fought across all of Gaul. He crossed the Rhine River into Germania, and even made 2 trips across the sea to the mysterious island of Britain, something no Roman general had done before. Back in Rome, people read his dispatches with wide eyes. Caesar was a brilliant writer who sent regular reports in clear and powerful Latin. The Roman people felt they were part of his adventure. However, the wars were not easy or clean. There was great suffering, and many lives were lost on both sides. The most challenging moment came near the end of his campaign, when a young Gallic chief named Vercingetorix united the tribes against Rome. Vercingetorix was brave and clever. Instead of fighting directly, he burned crops and villages, leaving the Roman army without food. It almost worked. At the siege of a place called Alesia, Caesar surrounded the entire Gallic army with walls and ultimately defeated them. Vercingetorix surrendered his sword personally to Caesar. Gaul now belonged to Rome, and Caesar had achieved his greatest victory. While Caesar was busy fighting in Gaul, the political landscape back in Rome was changing. Crassus had died in a distant war, and Julia, Caesar's daughter and Pompey's wife, had died during childbirth. The bonds that had once held Caesar and Pompey together began to weaken, and the men who feared Caesar's growing power worked hard to separate the two. Pompey was persuaded to side with the Senate against Caesar. The message was clear. Caesar was to give up his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. If he returned with soldiers, it would be considered an act of war. This moment could end everything for Caesar. If he obeyed, he risked being put on trial and politically destroyed, or worse, killed. If he disobeyed, he would start a civil war and fight against Rome itself. Standing at the edge of a small river in northern Italy, the Rubicon, a legal boundary, no general could cross with his army. Caesar faced a monumental decision. His soldiers stood behind him, and the night was quiet. Caesar reflected on everything he had built and everything he might lose. Then he made a fateful decision. He famously declared, "The die is cast," and crossed the Rubicon. With that one step, the world changed. Civil war erupted. Caesar marched toward Rome, and what happened next was incredibly rapid. Caesar's reputation was so powerful, and his army so loyal that city after city in Italy simply opened its gates to him. Pompey and many senators fled Rome, sailing east to Greece to gather forces. When Caesar entered Rome, he did so quietly and calmly. He showed that he could be generous in victory and did not punish those who had opposed him. He called this his policy of mercy or clemency, because he wanted loyalty, not fear. Caesar faced Pompey at a significant battle in Greece called Pharsalus. Caesar won completely. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was eventually killed. When Caesar arrived in Egypt shortly after, he met a woman who would become one of the most famous figures in history, Cleopatra, the young and brilliant queen of Egypt. She was in grave danger of losing her throne to her own brother. Caesar supported Cleopatra's claim to power, and they became close allies, and more than just allies. He fought additional wars, both east and west, and emerged victorious in them all. When he returned to Rome, he was undoubtedly the most powerful man in the world. To celebrate, he he held 4 grand public triumphs. The streets of Rome were filled with music, soldiers, and treasures from far-off lands. The people cheered for Caesar. With his power secured, Caesar moved quickly to implement his ideas. He had traveled extensively and had many visions for Rome. He reformed the calendar, replacing the old Roman one, which was confusing and inaccurate, with a new one based on the movements of the sun. This calendar, with some small changes made later, is essentially the one we use today. Caesar rebuilt Carthage and Corinth, worked to reduce poverty in Rome by sending citizens to new colonies, and granted citizenship to people across the empire who had long been without it. He improved the courts, restructured the Senate, and filled it with people from all over the empire, not just the old Roman families, because he wanted Rome to be an empire that belonged to everyone. These were significant and ambitious ideas, many historians believe, but they made powerful people uncomfortable. The old noble families had always controlled everything, and were now watching Caesar give their power away to newcomers and soldiers. They were especially disturbed to see him sitting in a golden chair, dressed as if he were a king. Remember, Rome had thrown out its kings 500 years before, and Romans were proud of their republic. In the dark corners of the city, men began to meet quietly and carefully. They called themselves liberators. Caesar had been warned about a prophecy. A soothsayer had told him to beware the Ides of March, the 15th day of the month. His wife, Calpurnia, had nightmares and begged him not to go to the Senate that day. Caesar listened to her concerns and even considered staying home. However, one of the men who had plotted against him, a man named Decimus, whom Caesar trusted deeply, came to his door. He laughed off Calpurnia's dreams and urged Caesar to walk with him toward the theater of Pompey, where the Senate was meeting. The morning was calm, and the city continued its normal business. Inside the Senate, more than 20 men were waiting, most of whom were former friends of. On the Ides of March, in the year 44 BC, they surrounded him. The first blade came quickly, followed by others. Caesar was stabbed 23 times. He fell at the base of a statue of Pompey, the general he had defeated years before. When the attack was over, the conspirators rushed into the streets, shouting that Rome was free. But the streets were silent. The people of Rome were not celebrating. They were stunned. As the news spread, something unexpected happened. The citizens grew angry, very angry. They directed their anger not at Caesar, but at the liberators. Even in death, Caesar's influence was strong. At his public funeral, thousands of Romans gathered to pay their respects. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general and friend, gave a moving speech over Caesar's body and read Caesar's will aloud. In his will, Caesar had left money to every citizen of Rome and had even given his gardens to the public. The crowd wept for their fallen leader. Then, their anger turned toward the conspirators, who had to flee the city. They had believed that killing Caesar would restore the old republic, but instead, it sparked years of civil war. In the end, power passed to Caesar's young adopted son, Octavian, who would become Rome's first true emperor, Augustus. Everything the conspirators had feared came true, but now, without Caesar's wisdom and mercy. Julius Caesar did not become a king, but his death led to the rise of an empire that lasted 500 years and shaped the Western world forever. Caesar's name became a title. In German, it became Kaiser, and in Russian, it became Tsar. Both were come from Caesar. He was a man who refused to abandon his wife when a cruel tyrant demanded it. He was a man who kept his promises to pirates. He was a man who crossed a river and changed history. The lesson from Caesar's life is both simple and profound. Ambition alone is not enough. Courage alone is not enough. A great mind and a warm heart, when joined together, can change the world. But remember, power without wisdom will always come at a terrible price. And so, my friend, we come to the end of today's journey. You have traveled back over 2,000 years. You have walked the streets of ancient Rome, sailed across the Mediterranean Sea, and stood beside a river on a cold night, hearing a man make a decision that changed everything. You did all of this in English. You listened, followed along, and understood. That's not a small achievement. It's a discovery. Every story you listen to in English is a step forward. Every word you hear and understand is a small victory, just like Caesar's early victories. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep going, keep listening, keep learning. The journey is the reward. If today's story moved you, if you learned something new, or if you felt the story of Julius Caesar come alive in your mind, please let me know in the comments below. Share your favorite moment, or tell me what you felt when Caesar crossed the Rubicon. I would love to read your thoughts. And if you want to continue this journey with me, subscribe to Listen Easy English and stay close. Many more stories are waiting for you. Great lives, great moments, and great lessons, all told in simple and clear English just for you. Thank you for being here, my friend. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and never stop your journey.